Hello everyone, welcome back to another oSTEM Hackathon training video. Again, my name's Sage, I use she, they pronouns. And before we dive into actually doing the design part of our web application, I just wanted to show you all this little step-by-step process of how to be successful in a hackathon. And right now, we need to start from step one, which is to brainstorm. And it's always good to brainstorm because if you don't brainstorm and you just jump right into coding and developing, you might create something or code something you don't really need because you didn't brainstorm beforehand, and it could be a big waste of time. And as we all know, a hackathon, you usually get 24 hours or more, and time is very important because you're very limited on time in a hackathon. And then after your brainstorming, you want to start developing and then programming, and always keep track of your timing. And then teamwork is also important. And then at the end, you should be working towards your goal, which is to finish your application and have its purpose functioning and all that fun stuff. So now that I talked a little bit about this step-by-step process, again, we're at step one, brainstorming. So what I want you all to do before getting into the coding part of this video and the design part of this video, I want you all to brainstorm what you want to create. So to do that, I want you to get out like a white sheet of paper and start drawing what type of web application you want. And remember that it should follow this general functionality. If you want to make something different than the site, because you don't have to make it Pride themed if you don't want, you could make any type of blog site you want. So all it needs for functionality is the ability for users to like post little articles like this, each article to have its little page, and it has to have users so you could log in and out and multiple users, and then this header, this navigation bar, and the sidebar, and that's all you really need. And then design like a settings page too. That's also important because we'll get into that in our videos later on. So anyways, I want you to pause the video, take some time to design, maybe find some like images or themes online that you want to use, because all this like rainbow pride imagery I got just from Google. And I just want you to start designing before we actually start getting into the fun part, which is actually implementing our design. So just brainstorm and think about it. And now that you all brainstormed your idea, in this video we'll be designing and implementing our navigation bar of our site, which is this you see on the very top. And then we'll be creating our header, which just has like the title of our site, and my header is right here. And then maybe if we have time, we'll get into this lovely sidebar right here. And we'll only be designing for right now, so none of these buttons will be functioning by the end of the video. It will just look pretty, but like it would be useless. And so again, with our schedule, we're going to start from designing the whole thing. So we're going to have a bunch of different pages that look pretty but do nothing, and then we're going to get into the back end. And when we get into the back end, that's when buttons are going to start doing things, and you're going to be able to log in and post and all that stuff. So the next step in the design part is we need to pick our font that we want for our web application. Now, you could use the default font, but in my opinion, that font is kind of ugly. So if you want it to look prettier, you should go to this website here called fonts.google.com. I'll also link this in the description below if you don't want to type that in yourself. And you could just navigate the site, look through all the fonts, and choose one you like. And once you find one you like, you'll click on it, and then you'll get a little screen like this called Selected Families. This stands for like font families. And eventually we're going to like copy this part, and we're going to put that in our HTML to import the font into our web application. So now to import our font we chose into our project, we basically copy these 3 link tags, and I'll explain what tag means a little bit later. But for now, you're just going to copy paste this, and you're going to paste it into here in your index.html. This is in your public folder of your repository. And then we just are going to paste that in. And the format got kind of messed up for me, so I'm going to fix that for consistency. And that is all you need to do, and now your font's imported and you can start using it. So a little bit about what HTML is this is HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is not a programming language, it is a markup language. And what it's used for is to just display things to the screen. So it's very important for design. And it does that through these little tags here. So for example, this tag is P, and that stands for paragraph. So anything in between the starting tag and the ending tag will be displayed to the screen as a paragraph format. And the ending tags have a little slash here, and the starting tags don't. And up here, these are link tags. They're meant to help you like import things. And this is the title tag. This title tag is the title of your site, and it shows up in your browser. For example, here, as you can see, this is the website we're going to make. It has the title of Connecting Pride, and it shows up on the little tab there. And that's basically what HTML is, and we're going to be using this a lot for our design. And what we're going to do is we're going to use React with HTML and JavaScript and CSS. And what React is going to do is it's going to basically encapsulate our code into little components, which will make design a lot easier and a lot more orientated and abstract. And yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. And a little bit about CSS, I'll get into that later, but CSS is basically the stuff that makes our HTML look pretty. So when you just display this without CSS, it's going to look really ugly. You're not going to see your fonts or pretty colors or anything. It's the CSS which adds like the color and all the design to our HTML. So if you're completely new to HTML, what I usually suggest is while you're following along these videos, if you don't know what something means, I'll briefly explain it, but you can always reference Google, especially if you're doing HTML on your own. Even me, I always still reference Google, because sometimes you just don't know how to do that one little thing. So there's a lot of good websites to look at documentation for HTML, and I'll link all the websites I like to use down below, so you could look at those if you ever need help or are confused. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start with is creating the design for our navigation bar, which is this blue bar you see at the top of the screen. So to do that, we're first going to want to go to our repository, and we're going to want to go to the source folder, and we're going to create a new folder. Now we're going to call this folder components, and that's going to store all of the components that we'll have in our web app. So if you look at the website here, this is a component. Each of these little post things are a component. The sidebar is a component, and it makes everything really organized and nice, so designing gives us less of a headache. So in the components folder, we're going to want to create a new folder, and we're going to just name that navbar. And this is going to have all the stuff we need to create that navigation bar at the top of our page. So we're going to want to create navbar like that. We're going to go in here and we're going to create two files. We're going to create navbar.css and navbar.jsx. So let me just create those. Once you create these two files, we're just going to start by going into navbar.jsx, and we're going to open that with Visual Studio Code. I'll have to choose another app like that. And right now, there's going to be nothing in your file because we just created it. So the first stuff we're going to insert into this file is importing React, importing the CSS file so we can make things look nice, and our function for our navbar. Now, each component has its own function. So in the case of the navbar, this is the navbar function, and it will encapsulate all of our HTML and JavaScript we need to make that component functional. So for today, we're just going to be doing stuff with HTML because we're starting with the design first. So now let's actually start creating our navbar. So first things first, we're going to give this divider or div tag a class name, and that helps us reference it in our CSS when we start giving stuff its own design. And then our header or navigation bar is going to have 3 parts. It's going to have top left, top center, and top right. And we're basically going to divide it into segments so we could place our buttons how we want. And after that, it's also important that you go to your app.js file and where you need to import this navbar so we can actually see our changes to it on the screen as we develop it. So to do that, we do import navbar from, and we're going to go to our components folder, navbar. And then we're going to come in here and call it as if it were an HTML tag, just like that. So now once we start doing stuff with this, we're going to be able to see it on the screen. So anyways, let's go back to our navbar. We're going to now add some CSS so we could just see that it's on our screen and we're all good. So we go here and we're going to do top nav, and that's our class name as you remember. And we're going to give it a background color. So you could choose any background color you want. I'm just choosing this blue color here. We're going to give it a width. And we're just going to say 100% so it's across the whole screen. Position sticky. Align item center. And we're going to give it display flex. After we do these CSS items, we're then going to give it a height of 50 pixels or whatever you see fit. We're going to put in our font family. And then we're going to put in this Z index. And so with that being said, you also want to go back to your app.js, and we're just going to remove this end tag, and we're just going to make it just one tag like that. So after you do that, you could run your front end app with npm start like we did in the installation video, and you're going to be able to see a giant wide item on the screen like this. So this is going to be our header, or not our header, sorry, our navigation bar. And we're going to add some buttons to this next. So we completed our CSS and our HTML for just displaying the background of the navigation bar to the screen. Also, just a side note, you can get that font family that you picked out from fonts.google.com by going to the import button, and you're going to see the CSS specification here, and you could just copy that into your CSS file just like I did. So now we're just going to add some, before we start adding our buttons, we're going to add some CSS for these 3 parts of our header. And I'm just going to copy paste the CSS I have in and just briefly explain it. With CSS and HTML, I highly suggest you don't like exactly copy my code, but like try to just play around with it yourself and see what design works best in your head for your brainstorming idea. So we're just going to do the top center flex 6 so it's in the right positioning, and then top right and top left will have the same CSS, which will be display flex, and everything will be centered and all that good stuff. So right now we're going to focus on top center because that's going to have all our important buttons, or whichever part of the navigation you want to have the buttons. It doesn't have to look exactly like my website, as you remember. So we're going to start with an unordered list, and we're just going to put that inside these 2 tags. That specifies that it will be in the top center. So we'll start with the unordered list. And sorry if my format is going to be a little janky here. So right now we specified a unordered list and we gave it a class name. Now we're going to have different list items within that. So the first list item, sorry, got distracted there. We're going to have home, and I'm removing this because we're not going to use those. We're going to use the other parts in the other part of the video. So the first thing we're going to have is home. And for the class name here, I just want to clarify, you can name all the class names for the list elements nav list item, I just added home because I'm making all my buttons different colors to be rainbow. And you could do the same. So after that, we're just going to copy this, and we're going to copy this, and we're going to have home, about, contact, and then I think we're going to have write, and then we're going to have log out. So I'm going to edit these and come back. So after that, your navigation bar is going to look like this. And now we didn't add CSS, so it's just this really ugly list that's not even centered correctly. So time to move on to the CSS. So let me just pull up my notes here. We're going to go to navbar.css. We're going to save these. Oh, I forgot to save my CSS. Let's see if that changed anything. Okay, there we go. Everything's centered now, but these little ugly bullets are still there, and we're going to have to change that in the CSS. So we're going to go to first things first. I'm just going to add all my code to change the different colors of each button, or soon to be button. Right now it's not a button. And so to do that, I just did navListItem.home because, as you remember, I did like 2 things in the class name, and I just made each button a different color, and we could see if that actually took effect. And as you can see, it did. Everything's different colors now. And after that, we're going to want to create the main CSS for our nav list item. So that CSS is going to look like this. We're going to have nav list item like that, and then we're going to do margin right. This just adds like a margin to the right of the object. In this case, one of our home, contact, or logout buttons. Right now they're not technically buttons, but I'm just going to call them buttons in the meantime because eventually they're going to become buttons that we're going to use. So we're going to want that to be 20 pixels. Just like that. This is a typo here. And we're going to want font size. We, of course, want the correct font size. And I'm just going to make mine 18 pixels. You could do it whenever you want. And then font weight. I'm just going to make mine 300. And then we're going to do cursor, pointer. I can't type today. Okay. So now we need to add some CSS for our actual list. And that's also very important because we don't want those ugly bullets on the side or anything. So let's add that now. So top nav list, we're going to do display flex. And we're going to justify the content in the center. Just like that. And for this, we're going to have no margin because that's just what I decided looked best. You could, if you want, just again have these values be your playground and just change them around and experiment. That's the best way to learn by doing. And we're going to have no padding. And then we're going to have no style for the list. This is going to make it so those ugly bullets aren't going to appear anymore, and we don't want those. And list style, always remember your semicolons. So now we're going to go back to our site, and we're going to look at our navigation bar. And right now, mine is complete. Aside from the little profile icon we need over here still. But I have all the soon-to-be buttons, and we're good on that. So our next step is to add the default profile icon and also our login and create account buttons. So I just went and did the code off video because I realized that maybe typing everything is going to take a long time. So the first thing I added was this image tag, and this just specifies to have an image. So right now, I just named the class name top profile image, PFP for profile picture, and we're going to have to create this new folder, which I'll get to in a second. And let me just get to that in a second here. So just copy that in for now, but we have to go first to our repository. So let me get to that very quickly on the screen here. Here, and in our public folder. Remember, we want it in our public folder because that's what users will be able to see. So that's where our images need to be clearly. So we're going to make a new folder, and we're just going to call this images. And in this folder, we're going to kind of organize our photos around a bit. I mean, we don't have to, though. Or honestly, let's just not. Let's just not have an icons folder. You could if you want, but it's not needed. Now, after that, we actually need to go put our image in here, and this is going to be the default profile picture. So right now in this video, I suggest going to Google and finding a default profile picture you want the users to have. So I'm just going to go grab mine that I had in the completed version. So let me do that very quick. Icons. Let me just copy this, and we're going to copy this in to our new repository, and hopefully it should show up. So public images and then paste. There we go. Now it's in our folder, so this path should work. And then next is we're going to have a new list. We don't actually need this class name here. We're going to have a new list, and this list is just going to be on the very far right, and it's just going to have our login and create account buttons. So right now, if we go to our site, it's a little chaotic because we don't have our CSS. So this is our profile picture, and it's obviously not designed well right now. So we need to add a little bit of CSS for that. So let's go to our navbar.css. And I'm just going to reference my notes very quick for this. So for the CSS, you can just put this anywhere you want. We're going to have top profile picture image, our class name here, and we're going to specify a width and height. I just did 40 pixels. And then border radius, that basically like rounds the edges, and we basically want it to be practically a circle, so I just did 50%. And then object fit, we just did cover. So if you save that and we go back to our site, it should look a lot better now. It's a lot smaller, it's not covering the whole screen and being obnoxious. So after that, that concludes creating our navigation bar up here. So the next step is to create our header. Okay, so the next component we're going to make is the header. And that is the thing that displays the title of the site. Now, you don't have to have a header if you don't want you to, but to follow along with these videos and get more practice, I suggest you have a header with the title of the website. So first things first, just like we did to the navbar, we're going to create a new folder and components, and we're just going to name it header. And in here, we're going to have two files, and you guessed it, we're going to have header.css, just like that, and we're going to have header.jsx. New file, and we're going to name this header.jsx. Now, first things first, you're going to open these two new files up so we could start development. And this one, we need to open up the CSS as well. Okay, so in header, we're going to create this code here. Now I just copied it over for sake of time, but let me explain it a little bit. So we're going to import React, and we're going to import our CSS because that's important for our design. And we're going to create a new export default function for header. So that means we're going to be able to use it in other parts of our program in other files by exporting it. And we'll just call it as header. So next thing is these dividers here. So the class name is header, and then we're going to have header titles. So I'm going to have two titles. So we're going to have the name of the site and then articles. Because basically, as you remember from my site, you had the site itself, and then there was a bunch of different posts or articles. And these are just going to be span tags. This is a way to just like show text on the screen. And then we're gonna have a background image. Now we need to add this background image to our images folder. So let me just go grab that from my other project very quick. So you can name it whatever you want. And I gotta add this to our public, remember it has to be in public, images folder. And you could just Google any type of like header image you want. You could play around, see what type of photo works best for your site. So header image, and then if that image doesn't show up or if there's an issue retrieving it and showing it to the screen, it's just gonna show header as text. Like that's if we have like some error or something. So now when we go to our site, we're not gonna be able to see anything yet because remember we have to go to our app.js and we're gonna have to actually import it and actually put the component to use. So we named it header, right? So just like that, but remember we gotta import it. So I'm just gonna grab this one, copy paste it, and then we're gonna name this header. We're calling header and we're calling it from component slash header slash header, and this was, be careful with the capitalization. And now when you see the site, it should show up with this. Now this looks really ugly right now because we don't have our CSS. It just has our image and the titles we want it to have. So let's go on over to our header.css file and start adding our CSS. So first off, we want the header to have some margin of 60 pixels. This way it's kind of separated from our navigation bar right here. And then for our different titles, we want it to be our correct font family. Remember to go to the Google Fonts and copy paste this little CSS thing here. And we're going to have it display flex column. And this is the color of our text. I just chose this dark purple color. You could choose any color you want. Also, something good for picking colors, you could go to a hex color picker online. Let me just show you the one I use. So usually I just go to Google like this. I do hex color picker and I could choose any color I want. And this is really useful. And then this little hex value right here, you just copy paste that and put it right here. And then your site will use that color. So keep that in mind when you're picking out different colors. So now that we did header titles, we both like, but let's look at our thing very quick. Okay, so we specified two types of titles, title 2, title 1. So we want that to be different sizes. So within our CSS, we're gonna do something along these lines. Now, we're gonna make one header 2. We're gonna make header title 2 smaller, I believe. Now, let's go look at our site. And it does exactly what we want, connecting pride articles. And yeah. And now the background image is still really ugly. So we're going to want to make the width of that 100%, and the max height 300 pixels. So you do that by again putting your class name that you named it over here. So put dot and then the class name and then put what you want to do with it in there. Really simple. And I'm going to start going a bit faster now with these components now that you kind of are getting the basics now. So now this is our lovely header and we're done with the header now. Okay, so now that we have our navbar and our header, all we do is we have it in app.js. Now this isn't really the best design. So we're going to want to make a home page. So to do that, you're going to come over here to your code or repository. Right now I'm in the images, so we could just go to the correct repository here. Connecting pride, that's the wrong repository. This one, and then we're going to go to source. And we have this components folder, and that's going to hold all of our like React components. And now we're going to want to make a new folder for our pages. And our pages will have like home page, settings page, and within those pages, they will have components as a part of them. And that's the great thing about React is it makes it really easy to design things because you can have everything just like in their own blocks and chunks, and you can just piece them together more easily. So we're gonna do a home page. So sorry, let's delete that. We need to make a folder here. We need to make a home page. So I'm just gonna name it home. And then inside, you guessed it, we're gonna have two files. We're gonna have a CSS and then the JSX file. So home.css, and then we're gonna have home.jsx. Just like that. And we're gonna open these two guys in Visual Studio Code to prepare them for writing the code. So there we go. So I'm just gonna copy some code over and explain it like I normally do. So first we need to import React in our CSS file, of course, just like that. And then we're gonna have our function here, and we're gonna have that return some fun stuff, just like that. And in that, we're gonna specify a little ending and closing tag like that so we could put stuff inside. Also, keep in mind with return, you can only have like basically one giant chunk. Let's just put it that way. Like you can't have like this and then a separate one like that. Like this is not allowed. That's not allowed. It's gonna complain. So always have like one upper level tag. Just like that. Just like we're gonna have there. So first thing here is we're gonna want our header to display on our home page, because we don't want our header everywhere throughout the site. We want the navbar on every page, but we don't want the header on every page. We just want it on our home page. So you're gonna do header just like that. And then we're gonna have a divider in there, and this divider, we're not gonna have anything in it right now. Eventually our sidebar is gonna go in here and our posts, but that's for another video. So once you're done with that, we're done with the home.jsx. Always remember to import your stuff you need. So this one you have to kind of navigate through the folders you made. So components, always remember to have from there. Components, we wanted the header, just like that. Perfect. So now we made our home page. And for the CSS, let me pull that out in my notes here. Yeah, you're not gonna have much for the CSS for the home page because a lot of the CSS is within these components. So for home.css, you're just gonna have home display flex. That's all you need. And now we're gonna have home instead of up here. So instead of having the header here, we could just remove this and just change it to home. Because home now has all the stuff to do with the header and some other stuff we're gonna add in the future. Just like that. And then you should be able to come to your app. It's having issues right now. Always be sure to have the right path name. So this is not in components now. We're now in pages, and these aren't capitalized, of course. So once you do that, it should look exactly the same. We just made things design-wise a lot better by separating our components, and we're gonna have different pages that use those components. So there we go, we made our home page. Now that we got a lot of progress done with our design and our development, we need to track those changes in Git. Now usually I would just make a commit for navbar separately and then start working on the header and then make another commit, but I forgot to do that. But it's always good to make commits small, so every time you get some progress done, just make a commit, and that just saves all your code to GitHub, so you could reference it and like keep track of like all the history of it. It's very good for like backup purposes. So we're just going to stage all our changes by doing git add dot. So as you can see, these are all our files. They're all nicely staged for commit. So then we can do commit, and you could just name it whatever you want. It's usually good to name it something that's consistent. So I'm just going to name it navbar header homepage, because that's all we worked on. Commit, and then we're going to do git push origin. Just like that. And if you go to your GitHub page, repository page, like on the website, you can see your changes have been pushed there. So I'm just going to leave the video off that because that's probably a lot to digest, especially if you're new to this kind of stuff. So to recap, we just created our navigation bar on the top of a page with all our buttons to home, about, contact, write, and then log out. But none of those buttons are functioning yet because right now we're still just working on the design. Nothing works, everything is useless, but just pretty right now. And then we also created our header, which had the title of our site, and we made it look pretty. And then we created our home page, and that's pretty much all we did. And the next steps that are going to be covered in the next videos I put out is we're going to next go over creating a sidebar, which will have some little information about the site and some categories if we decide to implement categories. And then we'll also have the default post like thumbnail layout and maybe the post page. And yeah. And that's the end of this video. Stay tuned for more videos. I'll be posting them throughout the week as I make them and when I have time. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. And also, if you're watching this on Friday, September 30th, Saturday is our first meetup thing. So that's October 1st from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And it's just like an in-person get-together. There's more information on the Slack. And at this little event, there'll be like snacks, and you could come and ask me questions if you're stuck or having any weird errors. And you could collaborate and just like work on your design. And if you're already ahead and have everything down, I still recommend you come because you could help other people who may be stuck and you can meet other friends in oSTEM. So yeah, please come to the event tomorrow if you're watching this as of September 30th. Thank you.